Good morning, girls. Today we will continue with the remaining aspects in Unit 1. Let's begin with a recap. Now, in the previous session, we have understood the scope of financial management. We understood what the important decision areas are, right? We discussed about capital raising at the least cost. We discussed about investment decisions, then about distribution of profits. Now, these decision areas are always taken care of by the financial management, keeping in mind the risk-return trade-off. That's what we mean by risk-return trade-off. Now, what is this risk-return trade-off? The risk-return trade-off is something that every firm and every finance manager will have to balance out in each of the decision areas. Let's pick up an example. When a firm is planning to raise capital, the idea of the firm would be to raise optimum capital at the least cost. Now, when we talk of optimum capital structure, we are obviously talking about a healthy balance between debt and equity, right? That's what we learned even in the previous semester where we discussed about leverages. Now, when you want to balance debt with equity, it is very important for us to understand that the firm which raises more debt is in a position to provide higher EPS to the equity shareholders. This is a point that we have time and again tested. We have worked out problems. We have understood how firms with a higher amount of debt in their capital structure are able to increase the earnings per share to the equity shareholders. Trading on equity. Girls, you all probably remember the EBIT EPS statement. Okay. Now, when you, if you remember, I also told you all that raising money through higher amounts of debt is like a double-edged knife, because when the earnings of that firm drop, then the interest burden becomes a huge challenge, and the company is not in a position to provide any earnings to the equity shareholders. And these people are the worst affected when the company starts defaulting on the commitments that it has entered into, right? So every capital structure raising decision carries a high amount of risk when the company plans to go in for debt. So the finance manager has to be very clear and aware as to what would be the ideal debt equity for that firm, keeping in mind a number of other factors. Those factors we have already discussed in the previous session, factors influencing financial decisions, right? So now let's go to investment decisions. Investment decisions, again, are long-term decisions. A company sinks crores of rupees and they will have to wait for the returns to start getting generated from the investments that they have made. So this would mean that the company will have to look at and calculate and compute what are the cash flows, what is the element of risk involved. Also, you remember we discussed various risk-adjusted measures when we did cover these topics in advanced financial management. So we understood even at that point of time that there is an element of risk in every investment decision that the company is making. So how will they look at risk factor? What tool will they use to measure and quantify that risk? And for a given level of risk, what is the returns that they are able to get or what are the returns that they are able to expect from a given investment? So this is another example to tell you that even in investment decisions, the risk-return trade-off is a very prominent part of it. And then when you talk of distribution of profits, which is the third decision area, again there is a huge question as to whether a firm which is earning surplus profits, what should it do? Should it declare a higher rate of dividend and distribute that profit to all the shareholders? Or should it retain the earnings that it has earned in order to meet the future growth and expansion needs? So what is the trade-off? What should they do today vis-a-vis what they will have to do in the future? So these kind of decisions have to be taken keeping in mind the risk and the return. So we have understood and we have covered these aspects either in theory or in problems, both in FM and in advanced financial management. And the idea now is for all of us to do a good recap and understand these basics so that we remember and we apply them at the appropriate time, right? Okay, so now let's move on to the financial management process. Girls, I have put it up as a small diagram. The financial management process begins with a very clear systematic financial planning. If you remember, even in the last session, I told you all that the first very important function of a finance person would be to prepare proper financial plan. Now, financial planning is the starting point, and this financial planning should cover all the three decision areas: capital raising, investment related, and planning regarding what should be done about the profit distribution. So in every decision area there has to be a clear thought, there has to be a clear cut plan, and that plan will have to be implemented. So here we have, girls, please have a look at this financial planning that's inside the box, and that planning covers capital raising process. It raises financial planning covers investments related decisions, and then financial planning also has to look at what should be done by the firm in respect of profits and whether dividends will have to be declared. So all these plans covering all these decisions have to be then implemented and regularly monitored. So when this process takes place properly and when the company is able to go forward using all the tools and techniques of financial management, then over a period of time the company will earn profits, the market price of the share will increase, and we have denoted MPS as PO, the market price of the share. The market price of the share, once it increases, it would mean that the company's equity shareholders benefit because the market price of their share has gone up. So that is truly called wealth maximization. W denotes wealth. Wealth maximization is equal to number of equity shares into market price per share, NPO. Actually, girls, this whole small diagrammatic representation will come in a horizontal line. I'm so sorry that my last shareholder wealth has come a little down here due to space constraint, but you can put it as MPS or shareholder wealth maximization, and you can continue in the same horizontal line. Okay, all right. Then, okay, so this is very basic. We then look at what is the interface between FM and other functional areas. Again there, take finance as a center or a pivot around which all the other functions of the business firm take place. Now, if you have adequate funds, the purchase of raw materials will happen at the right time, with the right suppliers at the least cost of the right quality, right? Same way, when you have appropriate funds provided, the purchased material will move into production processes will take place, and the company is then able to achieve a large scale production of a product, and they are able to make use of technology. Okay, finance moves the products to different markets. Finance will enable the promotional activities to take place, so marketing is again dependent on adequate funds. Then we must also remember that HR, human resource of the company, payrolls, their wage structures, the ability of the company to move and do well over a sustained period of time would depend on the quality of HR. And in order to maintain and in order to motivate HR, again you need to pay them well and you need to provide them good incentives. So HR, the entire department and the payrolls and the wage issues, etc., everything would depend upon how well the firm is placed financially. Then accounting, maintaining records, preparing financial statements, all these important work, and then meeting all the legal obligations, taking care of any of the legal aspects that would arise time to time. All these functions, R&D, okay, research and development, all these aspects would ultimately depend on whether the firm's financial position is good or not. So finance is like the nervous system of a human body. Now when the nervous system and when the blood circulation is happening properly, then all the wheels that are supposed to carry out different functions, all of them will be able to do it, and the firm will be able to get the different work of different departments done at the right time. So there is a very direct, very close relationship. Okay, so now we are going to look at the meaning of a policy, and then we move on to meaning of financial policy. What is a policy? In the most general terms, a policy refers to a set of guidelines, a set of do's and don'ts. A policy defines what can be done, what is permitted, and what cannot be done. Okay, so when you talk of financial policy, a financial policy is a framework, it is a set of guidelines which are framed to cover each and every decision area in finance, so that people who have to take decisions are able to refer to the policy and they are able to move in the right direction without confusion, without duplication of efforts. So what is the policy of the firm in terms of raising capital? What are the guidelines that they have to keep in mind? Or what is the set of policy measures that the firm has adopted for investment related decisions? What kind of analysis, what tools and techniques, what is the cutoff point? These are some of the important aspects that are to be understood clearly, so that the people who take decisions are, as I told you, they are able to move in the right direction. Same with what is the policy of the firm regarding dividends, okay, or what is the kind of retention policy that they would like to follow. So each and every decision area is governed by a policy. When the whole framework of all these guidelines are taken together, they represent the do's and don'ts, they represent the guidelines covering each of these decision areas, then the sum total of all that is referred to as a corporate financial policy. Okay, so a corporate financial policy is like a blueprint that enables people to understand how to take decisions and what are the boundaries within which action can be taken up, and what are the set of do's and don'ts. So it is like a outer boundary within which the people of the firm are able to take decisions. Okay, so this being the basic meaning, girls, we now have to have a relook at the syllabus. So in the syllabus, meaning, what is the meaning of a policy, what is the meaning of a financial policy, what is the scope of corporate financial policy. Now the scope of corporate financial policy, like I told you just now, is it would cover the guidelines to understand how decisions have to be taken, be it capital raising, be it investments, be it distribution of profits. So in each of these, what are the boundaries, what are the set of do's and don'ts. So that would be referred to as the scope of corporate financial policy. Then interface of CFP, we discussed it, how finance is directly involved and has a direct impact on the efficiency and the functioning and the success of each and every other function in the enterprise, be it production, be it purchases, be it marketing, be it HR, whatever they are. So that is regarding interface. Then what are the decisions that are taken in financial management? We discussed that in the previous session. To repeat and to rehash the same thing, we discussed very clearly about capital raising, investment related decisions, and dividend related decisions or distribution of profits, right? So these were covered exhaustively. Then going forward, the syllabus says debt financing. Debt financing is mentioned here since we have already understood and we know about all the sources of finance, be it equity shares or equity share capital or preference share capital, or it could be debentures, term loans from banks and financial institutions, or it could be in the form of retained earnings in case an existing company has made enough profits and retained it. So each of these sources happens to be a very important source of capital, and in the unit on cost of capital we have discussed each source quite elaborately. So here what you need to know is the syllabus says internal financing. Internal financing is nothing but the retained earnings of a firm, and then of course factors to be considered. We have already done it in the previous session. And then problems on EPS, we have covered that. You have covered it in FM, and Ramya ma'am has again covered it for you recently. And then problems on point of indifference. So girls, to sum up, although we have only relearnt the basics of financial management, what does it include, what are the decision areas, what is interface, and then what is the typical financial management process, then what are the factors that influence financial decisions, both internal and external. All these aspects probably would appear to you as repetitive, because somewhere you would have learnt about it in either in FM or in AFM. But the point is, in this particular unit, these important basic fundamental points need to be relooked so that we have the right framework and we understand overall how financial management processes take place. So we began by talking about how the decision areas are typically carried out in an environment of risk, and for every decision taken there is a trade-off between risk and return. That means what is the amount of risk that the firm will have to accept and bear, and for with that level of risk what would be their returns. So in every aspect of financial decision making, this aspect will have to be considered very carefully so that the firm is able to sustain its profits and grow stronger over a period of time. So with this, girls, we have concluded the basic understanding of all the aspects in Unit 1. I have already specified what questions you were supposed to cover in the previous session in terms of the factors and in terms of principles, in terms of defining FM. I hope all of you have done it, and in case you have not yet done it, I would sincerely emphasize that you all must go through the theory portion, learn how to answer it in a very systematic, organized way. That is very important, because often when we hear points which are repetitive, we tend to think that we know it and we lose interest. So don't do that. What you need to do is you need to go through each of the subtopics and see whether you have understood it in the way it is to be understood. So do complete your assignments and I'll see you soon. Okay? Take care until then. Bye.